as we kind of start to nail down the last few unknowns about tactical breach wizards, which is not to say it's nearly done. We've got to be careful about that. But I'm looking ahead at what's left to do and thinking, okay, which are the things we've never done before, which are the things that could go wrong, which are the things that could take a long time, and trying to just do some of those or try and reduce that uncertainty or measure it some way. You get to this point where you're like, you start to see, all the time when you're playing your own game, you see possible design issues or ways to improve the game design or different directions to go in. Like a lot of my thinking around games is I play something and I think, oh, it'd be cool if you could do this, or it'd be cool if this could happen, or I wish I was doing this kind of choice. And I do that when playing other people's games, and I do it when playing my own. But we're now at the point where like a lot of that stuff is like, not on this project. Like, there's not time to pivot at this point. We're not going to like change what kind of game it is. So there's loads of stuff ideas I have that are like, oh yeah, we can do that. We can tweak this, and that would be cool. But there's also a bunch that like that's too big of a change. And the one that keeps coming up, we sort of hit a similar issue with breach wizards that hit with gunpoint. And I kind of knew we would to some extent, which is this issue of like, when you offer the player upgrades to their character or characters, you want those to be meaningful, and you want them to define new play styles, and you want them to have these big fundamental differences. I'm not a fan of these small percentage increases. I want it to do something meaningfully different. And when you do that, it changes what the player can and can't do, obviously, by definition. But then you can't design puzzles because you don't know what the player can and can't do. What you basically have to do is design the puzzle for the lowest common denominator, the sort of basic setup. In fact, I remember hearing that Monaco, the top-down stealth game, where every character has a different specialty. My friend Andy Wynn was a level designer on that, and he said they had to design levels with like a test character that's for developers only that has no abilities. So it's like a heist team specialist thing, but has to be completable by someone with no powers. And that's, in Wizards, everyone has basic powers that we can be sure you'll have. In fact, all of the abilities, we know that you have them when you have them. That's one of the sort of ways we address this is you don't get to buy abilities with your level up points. You can only improve the existing abilities you have, because literally not having a power at all is much harder to design around than just, okay, you have the power, but you might not have the upgraded version. And yeah, it's for the most part it works. I'm really happy with how big of a deal the perk choices you make in Wizards are. You really do get to customize your character, and especially if you like an ability, you can make it super powerful. And there's some where like, okay, I don't love this now, but I can see with these 2 upgrades, it would start to get really killer. And that's the kind of stuff I love. But there are some kinds of upgrades that we can't really do because it would be too powerful, potentially, or it would just change how the levels work too much. And it's just this very delicate balancing act. And really, I was thinking about, a lot of the games I play in my spare time are mostly roguelikes, where you play a run that lasts, half an hour to an hour, and you die, and then next time you play, you'll play a randomized different version of it. And we can't give you the same kind of level up choices that roguelikes can, because it's kind of a cart before the horse kind of thing. I don't know which one is the horse and which one is the cart, and which order is sort of will be canonically considered the right one. But basically, the problem of the player might end up in a situation that they can't complete. In our game, that is something we must avoid at all costs. We must make sure the player cannot screw themselves in a way, in like a large scale way, where like from the start of this level you are screwed because of choices you made in your level ups. Like, we cannot allow that. It must not happen in our game, because it would just suck. You don't have enough foreknowledge to make those choices intelligently to that extent where you could guarantee that where we could feel like it's the player's fault if they didn't do this. Like, this is kind of XCOM's problem with the base building stuff. I think XCOM fixed a lot of its issues, and I think actually later XCOMs are better with it. But I think the first modern XCOM, it was very easy to just, if you didn't understand the base building, the priorities, if you prioritized the wrong things, your campaign was just kind of doomed. You're just never going to be able to recover, because what you needed to do is build this thing, which gives you the funds to build this thing, which gives you the resources to build this thing, and by mid-campaign you're going to need that thing. And if you never did that first step, now you've just got to do that whole thing, but much later, and when you're on the back foot and the game's much harder. So we always want to avoid that. and also old school game design, like the games that I grew up with often did have like, oh, you just didn't pick this thing up on screen one, well, you can't complete the game now because you should have. There was a time when that was just considered like fine, like that's just, well, you should have done it right. And these days, thankfully, that's not considered fine. And I think, like I say, XCOM, I'm pretty sure, like at least to some extent, addressed that base building problem. And now I think the two good kinds of games that we have, not the only two, but like a meaningful division to make within a certain realm of games is like games where you can screw yourself and you can, you know, your campaign can become unrecoverable. You're doomed now because of decisions you made, but it's okay because it's a roguelike. And that means that when you restart, you won't be playing the exact same game again. So it's not repeating yourself necessarily. It's playing a new run of the game, which is roguelikes, good ones are designed to feel fresh each time. And B, you kind of can have the foreknowledge, not the very first time you play, but as you play a roguelike, part of the process of playing that game is you're going to play many short campaigns, and therefore your foreknowledge of what's coming improves and improves. And that is part of the game. That's part of what you're learning is you try, you fail, and you get better at predicting what's going to come, and you get kind of a sense for what's coming. I remember my early days with Slay the Spire. I liked it right away, but I wasn't as sold on it as other people were because I felt like it was always asking me, which of these 3 cards do you want? And the answer to that depends on, well, what else are you going to offer me in this run? You know, there's a card that doubles the poison on an enemy. How many poison cards are you going to give me? That's a great card, it's one of the best cards in the game, but only if you get other poison cards. And if you never offer me other poison cards, it's not my fault that I don't have them, I'm just screwed. And that asking that foreknowledge of me felt it just felt like I was constantly being asked to make a decision that I didn't have the information for. Like, I don't know what the other cards in the run are going to be. If you tell me that, then I can make this decision. And actually, in the sort of middle of my my time with Slay the Spire, my journey with it, from like quite liking it to being obsessed with it, I was playing sealed deck mode, which is a custom game mode. And I think it's greatly to Slay the Spire's credit that it has so many ways to customize the game. You can just play the way you want to, separately from the main run. And you know it's not the main run, do you get unlocks? I don't know. But it's communicated that you're not playing the real game, you're playing a custom variant, and that's fine, I don't care about that. I just wanted to play sealed deck mode where they give you 30 cards to choose from right up front, and you choose 10 of them, and that's your deck at the start. It doesn't actually change the issue that I was talking about, where I'm still offered 3 cards and I don't know what's coming, so I don't have a way of foreplanning in that way. But because you choose a custom starting deck of 10 cards, I mean, that's smaller and much, much better than your normal starting deck. The game gets way easier, so you can play on a higher difficulty. And you have enough interesting cards then that your choices you make, you can have the information to make that decision on. And now that I'm kind of through that barrier, and through playing it that way a lot, I got to know the game much better. And now I know if you're off the Catalyst early on, you don't take it if you don't currently have any poison cards. Like, you don't have to guess whether they're going to offer you poison cards in future. Sure, if they are going to offer you a load of poison cards in future and you had taken Catalyst, it would have paid off. But that's a crazy gamble. Don't do that. This might not be good to Spire strategy, but certainly where I've landed is like, don't take a card that does nothing for you now in the hopes that it'll pay off later. Generally, take something that works with your deck right now. And then you can still build into synergies from there. Like, you might not get the absolute perfect thing you could have got, but you'll get something. And that's the kind of learning process that roguelikes allow, is through trial and error, which used to be a bad thing. In roguelikes, it's not such a bad thing because it's randomized, because it's fresh every time, and because the trials are short, and the errors are not that painful. And the errors are sort of not always fun. Losing a Slay the Spire isn't fun. Is it Dwarf Fortress where the motto is like, dying is fun or something? And that, I don't know enough about Dwarf Fortress to say. I wouldn't be surprised if actually dying is not really the fun part. But there's truth in the statement anyway, because games where you are going to die, the advantage of that is that you go through the whole spectrum from I might win this run to I'm absolutely dead already. Somewhere in there is the point of like, ooh, fuck, like, this is looking dicey, but maybe if I do this and this and this, I can get out of it. And that's, I wrote an article about this called a desperation innovation, where like, if you're pushed to the brink of failure, this is when you'll find every little possibility that your brain can possibly find in the tool sets that you've got, and explore them as thoroughly as you can. And that's really good for like emergent games and flexible games and stuff like that. I sense myself drifting from my point, which is that in a roguelike, it's okay for the player's decisions to completely screw them, unrecoverably screw them. In a linear game or a fixed content game, Wizards is a handcrafted content game, so it's Gunpoint, where we've made all the levels by hand and we know what they contain, and we have to be sure that everyone, no matter what build they've chosen, can complete the levels. It's okay if it's harder with some set of abilities. It's okay if choosing the right abilities makes the game easier for you, but it can't make it impossible for you. And it's on us to save you from failure. And it's okay if within a level you can get into a position that's unrecoverable. Actually, with Wizards it's a spectrum. So within a turn, it's absolutely fine if something you can do on a turn screws you completely. Because as long as it's apparent you screwed yourself, like, you know, this turn I got all my people killed, or this turn I've left it so that, you know, when I click foresee, everyone's going to die. Because you can freely rewind in Wizards, that's the whole point. Those kinds of errors are free. So that's the best kind of trial and error, no cost to error, quick trials, and lots to explore, lots of possibilities to get into and think about. And then on a level scale, if you get sort of 5 turns into a level and you think, I think I'm fucked actually, that's not unacceptable for Wizards. You know, we can't make a game where no matter how poorly you play your first 3 turns, the 4th turn you can always win on. Like, that's just not practical. It's a tactics game. It's going to be possible to make bad decisions. In some cases, in a lot of cases, if we're teaching you something new, we don't let you commit your turn if you've really fucked it up. Like if you fail to do what we asked you to do, and that's going to bite you next turn, for the sake of introducing this mechanic, for the sake of making sure you understand your abilities, we say, we'd like you to do this, like to actually complete this objective this turn, which is important because you need to know you can. Like if the player didn't understand they can complete it this turn, then they haven't understood the ability at all. Like there's crucial information missing. And the whole point of Wizards is you can rewind your turn. So you have all the space to experiment and to learn something in a safe environment before you progress. And so we do get to keep you there and say, like, yeah, we can't let you progress till you've done this because we need to make sure you understand that you can do this. But then in a proper mission where we're not teaching you anything new, we don't block you from progressing. There's like 1 or 2 moments where there's like a real specific thing that will need to happen. And we'll sort of warn you if you've made that very hard for yourself. But yeah, in general, like in a proper freeform level, you can screw yourself on a turn-by-turn basis, but we can't ever let you enter a level screwed. That's one reason that health doesn't carry over from level to level. If you get your people injured, even if actually in most missions you're allowed to get wizards taken down. Story-wise, like you have some little healing vials or whatever, some wizardy shit that can just bring people back once the fight is over. And then at the start of the next level you're at full health because we didn't want a situation where you did badly on the last level, and so this level is now you're starting with 1 health each, and actually there's an enemy here that can shoot through cover, and so there's not really any way to avoid losing any health, and you're kind of fucked. All of which is to say, next time I'd like to do a roguelike because it sure seems easier if it's not my job to ensure you can't fail. And to make sure that the process of like learning the ways you can fail and learning to avoid them is fun and sort of quick and smooth. And so that, I think the kinds of like level up stuff, character progression stuff you can do with a system like that is more along the lines of making builds that, sort of archetypal builds. In Slay the Spire, you can go into a full poison deck, you can go into a full shiv deck, you can spec your choices along a certain theme and really lean into it and double down on it. At the higher level of Slay the Spire skill, you're not supposed to do that, that's bad. But especially early on, it's very satisfying to do that, to get a build that just goes crazy on one thing and neglects other stuff and is just extreme in that way. That kind of thing we can't really let you do with your long-term character progression decisions in Wizards because we can't balance every puzzle, every situation in the game such that every different kind of character spec can solve it if those character specs are so different. If one of your, if your version of the Riot Priest doesn't have the charge ability and you've just gone crazy into throwing out your deployable cover and making that do all these crazy kind of things. There's kind of 2 problems. One is we would have to watch out for you making the game impossible for yourself by over-specializing. And then also we have to watch out for you making the game trivial for yourself by over specializing. Like certain puzzles can be trivial. Gunpoint actually, my design for the upgrades was constrained by trying to avoid that, and B, I did fall foul of it in this one particular case where like there's a device called the Hush Cracker which lets you jump through a window silently, and there is a level in Gunpoint where like the whole level really is only necessary because if you broke this first window, the guard would hear you and turn around and shoot you, and if you have a Hush Cracker, he doesn't, so you can just kind of like skip it. So there's a little bit of that going on, and in a game with 20 levels, it's not great if if the player can skip one of the levels because they're getting actually bought. And sometimes getting ahead can pay off. That payoff can feel good enough that it's worth it. But generally, in a handcrafted content made by suspicious developments, it's not going to be a great idea because we struggle to make enough content. Like that's why Gunpoint's only 20 levels long. That's why Wizards have taken almost 5 years. And that's always going to be the issue. So handcrafted content, we can't really let you skip it, which means we can't let you, come up with a build that's too powerful. We can't let you come up with a build that screws yourself. And so yeah, going for more roguelike games where we can let you screw yourself because the runs are short, because although you don't have the foreknowledge the first time through to know how to not screw yourself, you'll gain that over time. That seems more appealing to me next time, and that'll, I knew that anyway. There's lots of reasons I want to do a roguelike next, but this one I hadn't really thought about it in that sense of like the character progression stuff that I've been doing so far, really ever has not been as free as it could be in a roguelike. I mean, roguelikes have to be balanced. You don't want to make individual builds too powerful. But Gunpoint can do it 'cause it's fixed content. Heat Signature, you can make a very different character to someone else's. You get to fully specialize. There's no ability we force you to have. There's nothing we try and guarantee about your character. But I would say that the characters don't. It doesn't really feel like you level up your character. It's all equipment, and that was intentional, mostly for simplicity, just to stay focused and stay within scope. Which all I'll say on that is like. If we didn't entirely stay within scope, thank God we stuck to just equipment, right? Because if we hadn't, then it could have been even more overscoped and take too long. For a while, actually, in Heat Signature, if you've played the game, there's gadgets that are disposable, there's gadgets that are rechargeable, then there's gadgets that are self-charging. The self-charging ones are the really like build-defining ones. They're the highest tier of loot in the game. When you get that is going to be part of your playstyle from then on because it's free to use. Basically, it's just on a cooldown. My plan for those actually was that it would be like a bio implant kind of thing. So those wouldn't be items. This would be upgrading your character just to get that character upgrade feel, and it would have been functionally almost exactly the same. The only thing would be that you get it installed, and then you could get it removed, but it would sort of cost you something to remove it and replace it. And ultimately, I think that would have been good. I think that would have been like. It would have added something to the game to do it that way, but again, scope, like getting to that point and realizing like, if we do those items, it's done. It's zero work. They're just like self-charging was simple to implement. It makes a huge difference. That's the key part of it, that you get to define your build with this one major acquisition. Unique characters can start with those, and we can define a character that way. Adding just some friction to it, just making it so it's hard to change your choices about that. There's a downside to it, like it means if you find a cool new item, maybe you can't afford to switch it in or something, or you find something mid-mission, we don't really want to let you install it right then and there. It doesn't make sense, doesn't make it feel like an implant if you can do that. So then it becomes like, you can find a really cool item but you can't use it yet. They're not downsides that outweigh the upsides, but when a feature is going to be a lot of work and is going to have some downsides, along with it, then that always makes me think, maybe we don't bother. Maybe it's lower priority. We don't need to do that. So we never end up doing it. So in Heat Signature, you don't upgrade your character. After the anniversary update, you do have traits, so you do have much more of a build. Like different characters have different builds, but it's less up to you. It's more like, you choose one. Here's the kind of life you're going to be leading. Then you customize it with equipment, but you don't really level up as such. And that's like the biggest thing that I love in games that we've never really gone big on is just character builds. I just want to be able to spec my character in all these really different ways and have it go in totally different directions. And that would be a really fun thing to do. And it also fits well with a lot of my other priorities for the next game in terms of like randomization, roguelike, and not spending 5 years making content.